राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरवनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरवनचारी जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय जगन्नाथ जय बलदेवाय सुभद्राय जय सुदर्शनाय जय निताय चैतन्य जय निताय चैतन्य निताय चैतन्य जय निताय चैतन्य जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद। हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय, ग्रंथ भागवतम की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। हरे कृष्णा। Prabhuji, looks like I am no longer able to share my screen. I have been made as a, like I am no longer a host, I suppose. Okay, I am, but sharing, let me reshare actually. Hare Krishna, welcome to today's morning discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam. We are going to discuss Canto 3, chapter 26 and verse number 8. So let's begin with the sloka recitation. Karya karan kartrit, sorry, I mistake. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanang Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswating Vyasang Tato Jayam Udirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityang Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नंदनाय च नंदगोपकुमाराय गोविंदाय नमो नमः। कार्यकारण कर्तृत्वे कारणं प्रकृतिं विदुः भोक्तृत्वे सुख दुःखानां पुरुषं प्रकृतेः परम् कार्यकारण कर्तृत्वे कारणं प्रकृतिं विदुः भोक्तृत्वे सुख दुःखानां पुरुषं प्रकृतेः परम् कार्यकारण कर्तृत्वे कारणं प्रकृतिं विदुः भोक्तृत्वे सुख दुःखानां पुरुषं प्रकृतेः परम्. Hare Krishna. Anyone wants to recite? They could recite. Okay, we will proceed with word by word meaning, translation, and purport by His Divine Grace. Abhay Charanarvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Word by word meaning: Karya, the body; Karana, the senses; Kartritve, regarding the demigods; Karanam, the cause; Prakritim, material nature; Viduhu, the learned understand; Bhoktritve, regarding the perception; Sukha, of happiness; Dukhana, and of distress; Purusham, the spirit soul; Prakrite, to material nature; Param, transcendental. Translation: the cause of the conditioned soul's material body and senses, and the senses presiding deities, the demigods, is the material nature. This is understood by learned men. The feelings of happiness and distress of the soul, which transcendental by nature, are caused by the spirit soul himself. Purport: in Bhagavad Gita, it is said that when the Lord descends to this material world, he comes as a person by his own energy, Atma Maya. That's Srila Prabhupada is referring to verse number, chapter 4, verse 6. He says, Sambhavami Atma Maya. That's yeah. He is not forced by any superior energy. He comes by his own will. And this can be called his pastime or Leela. But here it is clearly stated that the conditioned soul is forced to take a certain type of body and senses under the three modes of material nature. Yeah. But here it is clearly stated that the conditioned soul is forced to take a certain type of body and senses under the three modes of material nature. That body is not received according to his own choice. In other words, conditioned soul has no free choice. He has to accept a certain type of body according to his karma. But when there are bodily reactions as felt in happiness and distress, it is to be understood that the cause is the spirit soul himself. If he so desires, the spirit soul can change this conditional life of dualities by choosing to serve Krishna. The living entity is the cause of his own suffering, but he can also be the cause of his eternal happiness. When he wants to engage in Krishna consciousness, a suitable body is offered to him by the internal potency, the spiritual energy of the Lord. And when he wants to satisfy his senses, a material body is offered. Thus, it is his free choice to accept a spiritual body or a material body. But once the body is accepted, he has to enjoy or suffer the consequences. The Mayavadi philosopher's presentation is that the living entity enjoys his pastimes by accepting the body of a hog. This theory is not acceptable, however, because the word pastime implies voluntary acceptance for enjoyment. Therefore, this interpretation is most misleading. When there is enforced acceptance for suffering, it is not a pastime. The Lord's pastimes and the conditioned living entities' acceptance of karmic reaction are not on the same level. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalang Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatang Sahagana Raghunathan Vitang Tang Sajivam Satvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha नमः ओं विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन् इति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण. So today's verse, like this entire chapter and this sequence of chapters, like related to Lord Kapila Dev's, giving or instructing or elaborating this system of the part of Sankhya Yoga is very important. And this is also, like, chapter is named Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. So this is also highly important. And especially Prabhupada, each and every verse from the beginning, he has given very nice elaborate classes also on these verses. So let's actually try to discuss some of the aspects of this. So the most important thing is two aspects we can pick up from this translation, that the body senses, right, and the demigods also, they're all, they also have material body. The demigods are not, they don't have fully a spiritual body. Essentially, it's all given by material nature. So material nature is also Krishna's energy. So it's called external energy, right? And like Bhairanga Sakti in Sanskrit. And the feeling and feeling of happiness and distress of the soul, that is also what the soul feels, right? Happiness and distress, that is also actually, it's enabled by the nature, material nature, but the cause is soul itself, right? Now we might feel some contradiction about here, right? In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, like 3.27, right? प्रकृतेः क्रियमाणानि गुणैः कर्माणि सर्वशः अहंकार विमूढ़ात्मा कर्ताहम् इति मन्यते. No, but so here, there it's mentioned. Let's see actually that quickly. 3.27, right? It's important to, have a big whole picture, like the comprehensive understanding as far as we can understand based on Srila Prabhupada's teachings. So yeah. So here it says, Prakrite Kriyamanani Guneh Karmani Sarvasaha Ahankar Vimudhatma Kartaham Iti Manyate. Here it says that the spiritual soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of the activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. Now, if we come back, then here it says they are caused by spirit soul himself. So now there is apparent contradiction, but it's not so. Actually, and further in chapter 18, Bhagavad Gita chapter 18, it's mentioned, there are 5 basically factors which actually gives rise to karma, right? So Daivam is there, like, Sthana, and like, of course, the soul. Let's see actually that I might have opened somewhere 14, probably, I think, yeah. Adhishthanam tatha karta karnam cha prathavidham vividhasya prathak cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam. So there are 5 things, right? Here it's mentioned that place of the body, essentially the performer, right? That means the soul, right? The various senses, the many different kinds of endeavor, and ultimately the super soul. It gives the sanction, right? They are the 5 factors of action, right? Now the question arises, finally, what is actually this thing, right? Like, who is the cause? So essentially, the genesis is, or the source is, the desire of the soul, right? The soul desires, first of all, that it begins from there, right? So soul is the, like the personal, the soul is the person, like, right, essentially, right? Not the body is person, but the soul is actually person, right? And it can, the soul can actually, we say mind itself, right? Thinking, feeling, willing, right? All these things. But essentially the soul desires, right? So because the desire originates from the soul, and soul has taken a decision, a rebellious soul to actually mention that. So the soul has taken a decision, by, being or developing a bit of enviousness and a desire or tendency to separately enjoy from Krishna or Vishnu in like Vaikuntha planets, right? So that's the origin. Actually, yesterday also I said more or less the similar things, and that's the same thing is basically continuing, because the soul originally willed, right, or we could say misuse the free will given by given by Krishna, because soul is qualitatively same as Krishna, right? Quantitatively it's not same, but qualitatively it can also have it has actually a bit of free will, right? And by misuse of that free will, that's the original negative or wrong desire, right? So, and after that, so the soul cannot be there in the spiritual world being a center of activity. Only Krishna and Vishnu in different forms, they can be the center of enjoyment or activity in Vaikuntha planets or Golok Vrindavan. So by design, it's not possible for the soul to be, the actual, the enjoyer in the center, right? So as Krishna says, Bhoktaram Yagatapsam Sarvalok Maheswara. So soul basically had some desire to enjoy separately, and then and Krishna is yes man. That's a very nice thing I heard from devotees. A very nice devotee. He mentioned Krishna is a yes man, and we will see how it is. So Krishna doesn't, chastise the soul there in the, Vaikunthas or Golok Vrindavan that basically how can you not be subservient to me? These kind of things Krishna didn't tell. Otherwise, it's like a love at the gunpoint, which Krishna is not doing, right? So then to rectify this ill-conceived notion of enjoyment by the spirit soul, Krishna gives the soul or all such rebellious souls a facility in material world. So they are all sent to material world to try to enjoy and eventually, get rectified by all these futile attempts that they cannot be independently fully happy, right? So this all rectification process, for that the soul is sent to material world. Now the material world originally, it willed, that it wants to enjoy on its own. Now once it comes into contact with material nature, they are made to forget their original connection with Krishna, and they think that they are controller or enjoyer. So this avidya covering is given to the soul, and soul is made to come in contact, or soul is made to be dominated by material nature by the will of Krishna. That is also we discussed yesterday also, right? Atmamayamrite Rajan Parasya Anubhavatmana na ghatetard sambandha swapna drashtor ivan disa. That's a 2.9.1, right? That's the answer, that unless there is Krishna's will, and there is no meaning to this contact of the soul with this material nature or material nature, which is inferior energy, but it dominates. So, and after that, the karmic cycle begins, right? In material body, whatever karma, the soul identifies itself completely with the material body or matter, and thinks that the soul, it is the body, not the original soul and eternal servant of Krishna. So, original misuse of free will has happened already. Now here, by this avidya, which is a thankless job by Lord Brahma, right? So he has created this avidya, right? 5 varieties, right? Sasarja Amisram, Adhat Amisram Adekrit, Mahamoham, like that, right? Mahamoham Chamoham Cha Tamascha Vritya, right? So essentially the whole idea is basically soul is naturally fully attracted to Krishna or Vishnu or different forms in the spiritual world. If the soul is allowed to retain that original remembrance, it will not be able to enjoy in this material world. It will immediately develop that restlessness. So to facilitate the original tendency of separate enjoyment, this forgetfulness is given to the soul. That is essentially, we can say that this forgetfulness is also given because soul wanted it indirectly, like that, right? That away from Krishna, I want to enjoy. Now, that's the cause of, so now, the original forgetfulness of the relation. Now it's made to identify with the body. And Now it is like, whatever the soul desires, based on the desire, then material nature facilitates that kind of thing. That based on the, in a spiritual discussion also, or even in material, any endeavor, what we say, everything begins from desire, right? So I want to, achieve something in life, right? Some excellence in some field, right? Whether it's earning huge amount of money, or having very palatial house, this or that, or some scientific, some artistic achievement, anything that begins from desire, right? And that desire also develops, by the bewildering creation of this material energy and our environment. Anyway, so the soul is the entity which desires, right? Because of that, it is made to go through the reaction of its activity, or essentially karma. So it's a soul, and material nature facilitates that, right? So we cannot say that, material nature is facilitating, so why should I get the reaction? No, I will get the reaction because I have willed or misused my will, right? So that's, I wanted to clear that upfront, that our bodies, body and senses here, right? And demigods, they are all, essentially body, senses, similarly of progeny also. They are all product of material nature, not the soul itself, but the body and senses. And the spirit soul himself is the cause of action and reaction, the root cause, right? And as a Paramatma, Krishna gives sanction, right, based on what we deserve, what we desire and what we deserve, like that. Bhagavad Gita again mentions 13th chapter, right? Nature enjoyer and like Purusha, nature and enjoyer. Purusha prakriti astho hi bhungte prakriti jan gunan karanam guna sangosya sad asad yoni janmasu, right? So material, the soul, even though it's a transcendental, but being in contact with material nature and basically different modes of nature it comes into contact with, and basically it enjoys similarly. So let's see that the living entity in material nature thus follows the wage of life, enjoying the three modes of nature, right? Thus he meets with essentially good and evil among various species, right? If there is negative karma, if he associates more with, sattvic, he will go to a higher planetary system, that is mentioned, right? And 14, we have that, right? 14. We have. So, yeah. Yeah, this 15. Or actually 14 only, I think. Yeah. So these are the, like, it's mentioned that if, one is more associated with Satogun, he will reach, a little better type of, he will reach their better planetary systems, and basically he will get good, more, basically positive type of body, but that will still be material body. So anyway, now having basically discussed the cause of suffering, is soul itself, enjoyment or suffering, right? Now let's actually discuss some other things which Srila Prabhupada has emphasized so much, especially this Mayavadi version. Srila Prabhupada always, elaborately emphasizes that Krishna's appearance on his own will, that is Leela, but the Mayavadis, they propose that, every soul is Brahman, which is true. Krishna says, Aksharang Brahma Paramam in Bhagavad Gita 8.3. But it's not that we are Parabrahman, right? And that, as Mayavadi say, that we have, by Leela, we are, doing this pastime of suffering. So that itself is an oxymoron. Pastime, suffering cannot be pastime, right? It's enforced, and enforced because we are conditioned soul. So this conditioned soul also I want to, discuss a bit. So this word conditioned, no, is very interesting. Why is it called conditioned soul? We say conditioning, right? This term we can hear, like, in industry also it's used, conditioning or air conditioning, right? Air is made to, be at the temperature and humidity which we like. And similarly, here we hear in terms of soul, we hear conditioned soul, right? Conditioned soul, essentially what happens, when based on our, association of the modes of nature and the karma accordingly, whatever we do. Now, let's suppose a soul needs to, or soul has to take some inferior body, right? Right. Let's say, let's take an example of, for example, a dog, right? Now, if you just transfer a soul of, like a soul which is residing in a human body immediately to a dog's body, it will feel very awkward, very awkward. Okay, so that will not be a, natural activity of a dog. So what happens in hellish planet or wherever like is suitable, the soul is trained to act like the body which it is going to take, means which it will be enforced to enter, right? The soul has to be thoroughly trained, in terms of activity, with, of course, through the subtle body, not the pure spirit soul, right? So, like that, it is either tortured or fully trained, right? And then when it is perfectly in tune with the mentality or the activity of the body it is going to take, right? Then it is sent to that type of body. So that's called conditioning. So, for example, someone is very fond of, eating meat, and some people say they like red meat, and they like, with blood, lot of blood, like all this, right? So they will get some carnivorous animals body, right, as depicted in the paintings, like under Srila Prabhupada's supervision, and those paintings we see in Bhagavad Gita, right, and almost all the books, right? So if someone is so fond of eating non-vegetarian food, they will get some animal's body, and that also based on what they deserve, right? Not that everybody will get tiger or lion's body, right? So if someone doesn't deserve that much, they will get some jackal or something like that, right? Some that sort of body, right? So this conditioning happens. Basically, the training happens, and the soul is eventually settled to act like that or behave like that, think like that, right? And then it is forced to enter that type of body. This is what mentions here, right? Conditioned soul is forced to take a certain type of body and senses under the three modes of material nature. And that happens through the karma, basically karmana daiva, like under the supervision of Paramatma. So soul doesn't have a choice. If a particular soul's activities are very bad, then accordingly he will get adham yoni, right? Like the lower species of life, right? So that is what is conditioning. So in that body, the soul cannot act like, in its natural like natural position of the soul, right? So soul will act like, if it is in tiger's body, it will act like a tiger. So you cannot expect, a tiger to act like, a civilized human being, right? Unless, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Krishna himself comes, then basically by mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Krishna, basically they can act in a constitutional position of the soul in whichever condition they are, because they are, negative karma and everything is completely nullified and they are purified by mercy of, causeless mercy of Krishna. That's different thing, but otherwise, in general, you cannot hug a tiger and thinking that, it's a soul to soul connection. That will not happen, because the soul, that particular soul is fully conditioned to act like a tiger, which is, attacking mostly anyone comes near the soul, right? So like that. So this conditioning word is very, interesting to understand. Yeah. Now, again, here, another point which Srila Prabhupada mentions. Yeah, this cause we already discussed. The soul itself is the cause because he desires. Now, see here. If he so desires, a spirit soul can change his conditional life of dualities by choosing to serve Krishna, right? Very important, right? In the Bhagavad Gita, from the beginning itself, Krishna says, right, just after Dehinosmin Ethadehe, that is 2.13, next verse Krishna says, Matra sparsastu kaunteya shitoshna sukha dukada agama paino nitya tam stitikchasva bharata. So there is no, so now why I'm going there? Because the world is full of dualities, this material world, right? If there is sukha, like happiness, then there will be distress, right? But if there is summer, there will be winter, right? So this world is of duality. If there is, honor, there will be some dishonor. Of course, even if we deserve or don't deserve, that will come. Yeah, man and appan, sukha dukha, right? So these things will happen in material world. What Krishna says that if you want to get out of this dual, basically physical, this material world, right, unconditional life, then you have to basically serve Krishna. And this, so there are so many points in this statement itself, right? So first thing is he desires. What it means? So only in human form of life, this facility is given that, this free will can be exercised to find permanent solution to such fundamental problems of life, right? Janma mrityu, jara vyadhi, dukha dosanu darshanam. So that's possible, this jigyasa, right? Brahma jigyasa or Atma jigyasa, that's possible only in human form of life. So if he so desires, so this also means that a human being in any situation of life, however bad it is or however good it is possible for the human being, it is possible for the soul when it is in human form, human body, then it is always possible that it can desire. It's not possible. For long many years, I had been asking that, if we are in too much mode of ignorance and passion, how is it possible that we will even desire that? No, it's always possible. Later I understood this thoroughly. Yeah, it's always possible for a human being to desire to get out of this miserable condition of existence, which is like essentially in this material world, right, of dualities. So it is always possible. So if he so desires, that means this desiring power is never lost, at least in human form of life, right? So we know that, right? That's one important thing. So we cannot say, that, I am so conditioned that I cannot desire. No. Otherwise, then there would be no reason for Krishna to, give it to, for whole public, right? And Bhagavatam itself mentions, right, which is essentially Amal Puran, yeah, that 1.7.6, right? Vyasdeva says that anarthop samam sakshat bhakti yogam adhokshaje lokasya ajanato vidvans chakre satvat samhitam. General mass of people do not know it. Let me actually, open that. It's important to see that, yeah. So see this one. Lokasya ajanato. Mass of people do not know it. But for them only, basically, see, but the mass of people do not know this, and therefore he has compiled in written format, and it's written actually somewhere in purport. We can see later. You can check on your own that it is for the common people only that Krishna has. Krishna Dvapan Vyas Dev, he has compiled this in written format, and people say that sometimes no. That Srimad Bhagavatam is only meant for, someone who is already on path of bhakti, reached some level on this. That is like they will be able to release it more. But Srimad Bhagavatam is available and it is for entire mass of people. Okay. So this point is very important because many times we think that we cannot do bhakti at that level. No, that's not true. If he so desires, the spirit soul can change this conditional life of dualities by choosing to serve Krishna, right? Now here again, so dualities, yeah, we discussed, right? And there is another interesting thing, about conditional life, suffering, dualities, this physical world, right? Material world. So in 7th canto, first chapter itself, which is titled Supreme Lord is equal to all, right? So there it's mentioned Nindana Astava Satkara Nekkarartham Kalevara. So Nindan Astava, like right? Glorification, dishonor, right? Like this, right? Nindana Astava Satkaram Nekkarartham Kalevaram Pradhan Paryo Rajan Avivekena Kalpitam. So this material body, this body has been given by material nature for our suffering only, practically, right? So what we consider enjoyment in this world? Lack of suffering, we call that happiness, right? But true happiness, as we discussed yesterday, true happiness means it's ever increasing. That's it, ananda, right? And what we say happiness is actually a mental, illusion. Yeah, or we think that lack of something negative is happiness, or some, some so-called happiness at the level of mind, not at the level of soul, right? So what is the characteristic of this physical, or mental level happiness? That it deteriorates the potency of happiness, it deteriorates over time. But ananda, right, or actual happiness or a spiritual bliss, what we call it, that increases over time, right? Anandam bodhi vardhanam, right? Pratibhatam purnamrita swadhanam, like that. So anyway, all we were discussing on that by using free will, which is possible in any situation in human form of life, one can endeavor to actually end this conditional life of dualities, right? So as soon as the desire develops, such genuine desire, then Krishna as a Paramatma guides that person to come in contact with some devotee, right? So that is how practically most of us have, come into contact with ISKCON, right? Now let's actually see a few other points. The living entity is the cause of his own suffering, but he can also be the cause of his eternal happiness. Yes. So that's what the use of free will and misuse of free will, right? That's what. So if we desire actually, then Paramatma as a Chaitya Guru, he helps us basically get in contact with some devotee. And if we read some of the anecdotes of great so many disciples of Srila Prabhupada, it have happened with practically everyone, right? If you take, for example, His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj, right? So he writes in the book Watering the Seed, right? How he came in contact with ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada, right? So he had the desire to search for a genuine guru, right? He had that desire, right? For a spiritual perfection or something like that. Okay, so he came across few types of so-called gurus, and because his desire was sincere, Krishna helped him understand that none of them were what guru he's looking for. Finally, when he came in contact with Srila Prabhupada, right, then he explains or elaborates how was his first experience of touching, keeping the prasad on his tongue, and what sensation he felt. How Srila Prabhupada responded to him. On his first question. That Srila Prabhupada responded to him. That depends on whether you want to serve God or you want to become God, and that precisely is a topic mentioned here, right, in this sloka. Right, I will discuss how it's connected. So. And then Giriraj Swami Maharaj, he understood that Srila Prabhupada is able to look not only at me here, but at my apartment, at my bathroom's door, and door's backside, I have kept a poster that you are God. So Giriraj Swami Maharaj that time felt that Srila Prabhupada is able to look all the way up to that writing of my bathroom's door. And it was so, like a life-changing moment for him. And then he joined very soon, full time, right, like that. So that's what. So just going back a bit, why I mentioned that Srila Prabhupada's that code, how is it related here? The word Purusham. So Srila Prabhupada has Purusham means here what? The spirit soul. Generally spirit soul is actually not generally, it is actually Prakriti only, right? It's a para Prakriti. Material nature is apara Prakriti, but it's the soul is means referred here as Purusham, right? So Srila Prabhupada elaborated on this word also very nicely in his lecture in Mumbai, Bombay at that time, right? So what he says that even though the soul is Prakriti, and that means it is to be enjoyed by the Purusha, right? Only Purusha is Krishna, right? Everyone else is Prakriti. Soul is superior, material nature is inferior. But why it's mentioned Purusham here? Because the soul has rebelled against Krishna's will to be subservient to Krishna and wanted to be like Purusha, and in this material world it is having that Purusha tendency. That's why it's mentioned as Purusham. And similarly in Bhagavad Gita 13.22, right? Purusham prakriti asthohi bhumte prakritijam. So that Purusha is also not really like that way genuine Purusha, but in Prakriti situation, the soul thinks that it is Purusha. Because of that, they are, mentioned as Purusha here, this verse or any such verse in the same context. So that we have to understand that we are not the Purusha, Krishna is Purusha. Now, there is one more thing. As soon as we say that, the soul has to be subordinate as a Prakriti, where in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna himself mentions, right? Aparyamitastu prakriting vidhing me param jiva bhutang mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat, right? So apart from this, my inferior energy, there is another superior energy. What is that? Which is spirit soul, essentially, right? So like that. So coming back here, free choice, right? This thing we were discussing, right? Enjoy or suffer consequences, right? 1 second. he wants to engage in Krishna consciousness. A suitable body is offered to him by internal potency, right? So there is a spiritual body also, right? In spiritual planets, which is given to the soul when soul is eligible to go back to there, or the souls who are already there, right? So a spiritual body is given, which is always, basically suitable for the Vaikuntha planets, right? So yeah. So one thing I wanted to clarify, it appears, by this discussion that, if soul has to remain subservient, it looks like gives an, bit of idea that, it's like exploitative situation. No, that's not so. That also we have to understand. We have to understand thoroughly. Otherwise, it becomes like, the rebellious attitude that may not go away fully, right? Again, I discussed the same point yesterday, that the relationship or the spiritual relation between soul and Krishna is not that of exploitation. It's Krishna doesn't come here, I heard from Maharaj that when he's always Saravanan Maharaj, it's not that there is a scarcity of, few thousand laborers in his Vaikuntha that Krishna has to come here to, harness some souls. Not that, not like that. It's like Krishna is Rasik Sekhar, and he, wants to enjoy unlimitedly, ever increasing way, right? Again, it might look like that it's exploitative situation, that for his enjoyment, he's having so many souls. No, the beauty is, contrary to the material relationship, in the spiritual relationship, the souls who participate in Krishna's Leela, they enjoy more than Krishna, right? So that's the beauty here, right? In material world, we see that, so basically, if there is servant to a rich man, the servant, yeah, he will be, getting salary and all that thing, and he will be working in the same, palatial place where the rich man is living. All that is there, but he is not the, equally enjoying the facilities. He cannot enjoy equally, right, as a king or as a rich person. But here, not only equally, but a soul in relationship with Krishna or Vishnu, he basically enjoys at same or even more than Krishna, right? And the proof is that we see several examples, right? Even like yesterday I was discussing about Prahlad Maharaj, right? When he was on the lap of Lord Nrsimhadev, and he was so happy, blissful, that even Nrsimhadev was, he felt that Nrsimhadev felt that Prahlad is more blissful than me myself, right? So then Nrsimhadev was perplexed, right? Several acharyas have mentioned this in classes. That's one example, and there are many others, right? The topmost example is Srimati Radharani herself, right? She is the top devotee of Krishna, right? The topmost, right? By constitution. And she enjoys, Krishna's association more than Krishna feels pleasure of himself, right? So Krishna being the Rasik Sekhar, why would he be left behind in enjoying even higher rasas, right? Or melos? To fulfill this desire, he came in the mood of topmost devotee, which is Srimati Radharani, right? So we see, right, there are very sound proof here that the relationship between soul and Krishna, which is bhakti is not exploitation. It's not a relationship of exploitation, right? We just have to, basically put our effort and progress in bhakti, right? Then based on our sincerity, Krishna will give us that, we will naturally, it's a byproduct. It's not that, for some sort of happiness, separately. It's not that Krishna is a means to achieve an objective, right? He is the goal, and he is the, Krishna Bhakti itself is the sadhan. So it's an automatic process. It's not that, Krishna is the means. No, he's the goal also, and Krishna Bhakti is goal also and means also, right? So all this thing, just I wanted to clear that it's not an exploitative situation, right? Now, despite that, Krishna gives the facility that, to some souls who are, not fully, they want to be free from, material nature's effects like Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi, but they don't want to surrender to Krishna. So to such souls, Krishna gives the Brahma Jyoti, right? So we can see that it's not, something like, unless you come to me, my way or highway. It's not like that. So even to such rebellious souls who sincerely want to be free from these fundamental problems of life, material life, but they don't want to go to Krishna, right? They don't want to engage in his service. So Krishna accommodates such persons, such souls also. So now we can see that it's fully established that Krishna is not exploitative, is not sadistic, right? Now that's is very critical point, because unless this is clear, we will not be completely free from the idea that unless we do bhakti, why do we have to suffer? No, they can go to Brahmajyoti. But the problem is the soul is made, the soul is constitutionally something that it cannot remain in its full potential of such ananda unless it is in contact with Krishna. So that's why actually from Brahmajyoti also, basically souls get eventually bored, and they again come to basically the what do you say, karma kshetra, which is earth or earthly planets, right? And where they perform bhakti, and then or maybe to higher planets, Janalok, Taplok, wherever, and essentially they have to then they realize that unless they are in touch with Krishna, they cannot have full ananda, right? Right. Some ananda is there in Brahman. People say it's not, but it's mentioned in the scripture, some Bhagavatam itself. Some ananda is there, but it's not the full, unlimited, ever increasing ananda. That is not possible unless the soul is in service of Vishnu, Krishna, anywhere in a spiritual planet, right? So that's not possible. And the highest, the ananda is possible in Golok Vrindavan, right? So that's about the constitutional position of the soul, right? So that was an important point. Now, yes, Srila Prabhupada has refuted, Mayavadi philosophy, which is very, very unreasonable, right? So it is not acceptable because pastime means voluntary acceptance. Yeah, very nice. There is one very nice example I want to share here. For example, let's suppose you are invited by some acquaintance or friend or relative for a party, right? You have to go to their house, right? Now let's suppose when you go there, they will ask you that on the backside or somewhere near their home, near their entrance, there is a very bad smelling pit. Means it is full of pus, urine, and other things, right? Abominable things, right? They will say that the person who is invited, right? So that they will tell you, before you can join the party, you have to stand in that pit, neck deep or fully submerged for maybe 9 hours, and then after that you come and join the party, right? So what sort of enjoyment or party plan is that, right? So the analogy is in the mother's womb, the situation is very uncomfortable. So if the material world were meant for the genuine enjoyment of the soul, would we have to prepare by suffering in the womb for 9 months or so, whatever? Different species might have different tenure, but the idea is that, right? So the analogy is very simple and very apt, right? So if our preparation is like that, how come this material world be actually, true place for enjoyment, right? It's like that. So yeah, so we can understand that it's not Leela. Are we in the mother's womb because of our Leela? No, that's very uncomfortable situation, right? So it's a based on simple logic given by Acharyas, we can understand that Mayavadi philosophy is completely invalid and baseless, whatever. So that means that they themselves are under Maya, and that's why they think like that, right? And we discussed yesterday that Mayavadis actually they are great offenders at Krishna's lotus feet, and they unless there is a causeless mercy of some great Vaishnava Acharya or some great Vaishnava on them, they will remain like that, and they, because of such offense, they will attain basically lower species or something like that in bad condition, right? They will remain away from Krishna essentially for long time. So yeah, these are the things I wanted to share. And the genesis is same. The theory is same all the time, that by misuse of our free will, we have come here. That was the original cause. And later, basically, we wanted to enjoy away from Krishna. And for that, by desire of Krishna, Brahmaji created the 5 kinds of nescience, right? So because means we cannot be in the material world with being fully Krishna conscious. As soon as we become, fully Krishna conscious, essentially we remain, we become fully spiritual, and at the end of the basically that material body and giving up the material body, one basically goes in service of Krishna, right? Wherever Krishna desires, right? All that. So the genesis is basically the misuse of free will, right? So same thing will be, same thing is answer to all similar sorts of question. So that's it. If there is any question, one could ask. You could ask, Prabhuji. Yeah. Okay. If we don't have any question, we can stop here. ग्रंथा श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय. Hare Krishna.